The alien ship drifted through the silent void, its crew alert but relaxed. They had been chasing a strange signal for days, and now they had found it. A massive, ancient vessel floated before them, scarred by time yet still intact. The design was unusual, nothing like the sleek alien ships of modern fleets. Its hull was thick, dark, and carried strange markings that glowed faintly even after so many centuries. The alien crew gathered around the viewing screen, whispering in curiosity. At the center of the hull, written in countless languages, was a single phrase repeated again and again: "Do not wake the humans." The crew laughed. To them, it sounded like a joke from a primitive age. Their leader, a tall alien with sharp features and eyes like cold glass, shook his head and grinned. Humans are gone. Their species burned itself out long ago. What danger could remain here? Another alien, smaller and nervous, shifted uneasily. Then why is the warning still glowing? Look, this script is old, older than any empire we know. Perhaps it is not just decoration. But the others ignored him. Curiosity was stronger than caution. They wanted to see what treasures might be inside, what secrets the humans had left behind when they disappeared. The docking bay of the alien ship extended a bridge, attaching to the massive vessel. As the doors creaked open, a cold wind of stale air escaped, carrying the faint smell of metal and dust. The aliens stepped inside carefully, their boots echoing against the steel floors. The corridors were wide and strangely silent, as if the ship itself was holding its breath. Everywhere they looked, the same warning repeated on the walls: "Do not wake the humans." Some were written in alien tongues no one had spoken for thousands of years. Some were scratched in haste, as though carved by claws and trembling hands. A shiver ran through the smaller alien's spine. He whispered, "This is not right. Someone wanted this message to last forever." They reached a chamber deep within the ship. Behind the thick glass windows, rows of pods stood in silence. Inside each pod was a figure, pale, unmoving, and unmistakably human. The aliens froze, their eyes wide. They had heard legends, stories told by travelers in forgotten space stations. Humans were said to be violent, unpredictable, dangerous beyond measure. Yet here they were, sleeping like fragile statues, locked away in glass coffins. One alien pressed close to the glass. So it was true. They really existed. He tapped the surface and frost fell like powder. But look at them. Pathetic, small, weak. What threat could they ever pose? His words carried arrogance, but his voice trembled slightly. The nervous alien looked at the control panel glowing softly nearby. Strange symbols shifted across the screen, pulsing as though alive. He reached out, then quickly pulled his hand back. "We should not touch anything. The warnings are everywhere. This ship feels awake." The leader laughed and placed his clawed hand firmly on the panel. The symbols changed instantly, brightening as if recognizing a command. A low hum filled the chamber, and the pods shuddered. Frost cracked along the edges, hissing as warm air began to seep inside. The aliens stepped back in alarm. "What have you done?" shouted one of them. But it was too late. The leader smirked, though sweat beaded across his forehead. "Nothing to fear. They are relics. Let us see what one of them looks like when it opens." The first pod released a long hiss, steam spilling into the room. Inside, the human stirred. His eyes fluttered open slowly, revealing a sharp, piercing gaze that locked directly onto the aliens. For a moment, silence ruled the chamber. The human blinked once, twice, then sat up. His movements were stiff but steady, his breathing strong. The aliens exchanged uneasy glances. The leader forced a laugh. "See? Harmless? Just an old animal clinging to life." But the human's gaze did not waver. He studied them with unsettling calm, his lips parting to form words in a language long thought dead. Yet the meaning was clear, carried by tone and presence. "Who woke us?" The aliens stiffened, their hearts pounding. None dared answer. The human's voice was not weak. It carried weight, command, as though he were not just speaking, but judging. He looked around, noticing the pods around him, then returned his eyes to the aliens. His expression shifted into something between curiosity and grim certainty. The smaller alien whispered, almost trembling, "We must leave. Now. Shut it down before more awaken." He tugged at the leader's arm, but the leader shook him off angrily. "No, this is knowledge. This is power. If humans truly once ruled, then their secrets will be ours." The human tilted his head slightly, as though he understood every word, despite the alien tongue. A faint smile curved his lips. It was not a friendly smile. It was sharp, knowing and heavy with promise. The kind of smile that said the game had already begun, and the aliens were far too late to stop it. The pods behind him began to glow, faintly at first, then brighter. One by one, the systems that had slept for centuries came alive. The chamber filled with the hum of ancient machines, each sound pulsing like a heartbeat. The aliens felt a cold dread seep into their bones. The human finally stood, his frame stronger than it had seemed. His eyes swept across the group, pausing on each alien as though weighing their worth. Then, in a voice that carried across the chamber, he whispered, "You should not have ignored the warning." The aliens' blood ran cold. The warnings on the walls were no longer distant relics. They were truth. They had unleashed something far greater than they understood. The nervous alien stumbled backward, his claws scraping against the wall. "We must run, now," he cried. But deep inside, every one of them knew. It was already too late. The human sat inside the open pod, steam still curling around his body. His chest rose and fell with calm, steady breaths. The alien stood frozen, unsure whether to move closer or to run. His skin looked pale, almost fragile, but there was nothing weak about the way his eyes moved. They were sharp, scanning the chamber, studying every detail with the focus of a predator who had just woken up hungry. He lifted his head slowly, and his gaze locked on the alien leader who had pressed the button. The leader smirked, trying to cover the fear that tugged at the edge of his mind. "You are human, yes?" he said, his voice mocking. "Your kind vanished long ago. You are nothing but a ghost of history." The human did not reply at once. He tilted his head as if trying to recall the sound of speech. Then, in a voice low and rough but carrying clear power, he asked one question. "How long have we been asleep?" The words, though strange, seemed to resonate through the chamber. The aliens understood them without translation, as though meaning itself crossed language. The leader laughed sharply, though his throat was dry. "Centuries, maybe longer. We now rule the galaxy. You are dust compared to us." The human's lips curved into a faint smile, but it was not warm. It was the smile of someone who had just learned a secret he already suspected. He nodded slowly, and his voice came again, firmer this time. "Then you have made a mistake." The aliens stiffened. One of them hissed nervously, stepping back. The leader narrowed his eyes and barked, "Mistake? You are one body, one fragile animal. Look at you, thin arms, no claws, no armor. What could you possibly do?" But as he spoke, the lights inside the chamber flickered. A low hum spread across the room, and other pods blinked with life. Pale figures shifted within, their hands twitching, their chests beginning to rise and fall. The air grew heavy, filled with the sound of awakening. The smaller alien, the one who had been nervous since the start, pointed a shaking hand at the glowing pods. "Look, more of them. They're waking up." His voice cracked with fear. "We should leave. We should." The human rose from his pod, his movements slow but steady. His bare feet touched the cold floor with a firm sound that echoed in the chamber. He stood taller than the aliens had expected, his frame lean but solid, his posture unshaken. His eyes scanned the crew once more, and when he spoke, his tone was calm, almost too calm. "You should not have woken me." The leader bared his teeth in anger, trying to regain control. He waved his weapon toward the human. "Silence, relic. You belong to us now. We will study you, take your blood, and see why your kind hid themselves. If the rest of your species is like you, we will sell them as slaves." The human did not move. He only stared, unblinking, at the leader. Then, in a chilling voice, he asked, "You think you control this place?" The leader hesitated. Before he could answer, the ship around them seemed to groan as if alive. The walls vibrated, the floors hummed, and the pod lights flared brighter. One by one, the glass covers hissed open, releasing more steam, more shadows of men and women rising from their sleep. The aliens stumbled back, their weapons shaking in their hands. The smaller alien whispered in horror, "There are dozens, maybe hundreds. What have we done?" The first human glanced at the pods, then back at the aliens. "You've done what all the others were warned against. You woke us before the time." His voice carried finality, as though judgment had already been passed. Another alien shouted in panic, firing his weapon at the nearest pod. A blast of energy struck the glass, but the shield absorbed it. The weapon hissed and sputtered, failing as if the ship itself rejected the attack. The human's expression did not change. He stepped forward, his presence alone making the armed alien stumble backward. The leader snarled, desperate to maintain authority. "You are not gods! You are just flesh!" The human stopped a step away from him, his eyes cold and sharp. "Flesh?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow echoed in every ear. "Then why did your ancestors carve warnings across the stars? Why did they beg us never to be disturbed?" The leader flinched, unable to respond. Behind him, more humans climbed out of their pods, standing tall, silent, and alert. They did not speak, but their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, as if some ancient fire burned within them. Their bodies looked stronger by the second, muscles tightening, movements growing smoother. The aliens huddled together, panic spreading among them. The smaller alien dropped his weapon, backing away slowly. "We should not be here," he muttered, his voice shaking. "We must run now, before it's too late." The first human tilted his head again, watching them as though they were insects crawling across his floor. He gave a faint smile, one that carried no kindness. "Too late," he said softly. The chamber filled with the sound of footsteps as more humans stepped onto the cold steel floor. The air grew warmer, the hum of the ship deepened, and the lights burned brighter. The aliens could no longer pretend this was just one fragile relic. This was the beginning of something far larger, something unstoppable. The human looked back at his people, then at the terrified aliens. His final words cut through the silence like a blade. "We are awake." The aliens felt the weight of those words crash over them like a tidal wave. Their leader, once arrogant, could no longer speak. Fear tightened his throat, and sweat beaded along his skin. He had wanted power, but now he understood. They had not found treasure. They had not uncovered secrets. They had opened the door to their own nightmare. The chamber was filled with heavy silence, broken only by the low hum of awakening machines. More pods hissed open, releasing clouds of steam that rolled across the floor like ghostly fog. Human figures stepped out one after another, their eyes sharp and unyielding. The aliens stared, their nerves breaking under the weight of what they were witnessing. The alien leader tried to bark orders, his voice cracking. "Hold your ground. They are only waking creatures. We are armed." But even as he shouted, his own weapon trembled in his hand. The other aliens looked at each other with wide, frightened eyes. Their training told them to fight, but their instincts screamed to run. The smaller alien, the one who had warned them from the start, clutched his chest. His breathing came fast and uneven. "We cannot stay here," he whispered desperately. "Do you not feel it? The ship is alive. It is choosing them. It rejects us." His voice echoed softly, and for the first time, some of the crew agreed. They nodded quickly, stepping back toward the door. But the door did not respond. The control panel blinked red, sealing them inside. The leader cursed, slamming his claw against the panel, but the system ignored him. The entire vessel seemed to respond only to the humans. The ship was no longer a relic. It was a fortress awakening with its masters. Panic grew. The aliens argued loudly, their voices overlapping. Some demanded they flee to the docking bay. Others wanted to capture one human as proof of discovery, while a few were ready to fire at all of them. Their words clashed, a storm of fear and pride, until one alien aimed his weapon at a human woman who had just stepped out of her pod. The blast of energy shot across the chamber, but before it struck, the lights flickered, and the weapon died in his hands with a sharp hiss. Sparks burned his claws, and he dropped it with a scream. The aliens froze in disbelief. Their most advanced technology had failed, as though the ship itself had drained its power. The human woman, unharmed, looked at him calmly. She did not speak, but her silence was heavier than any words. Her eyes glowed faintly, as if something ancient had awakened inside her blood. She walked past him without a word, joining the others who now stood together, their posture straight, their presence commanding. The first human, the one who had woken before the rest, looked at the aliens with cool indifference. "Your tools will not save you here," he said softly. "This place belongs to us." The aliens recoiled, their arguments collapsing into raw panic. One shouted, "We must leave! We must escape before they surround us!" He slammed his fist against the sealed door, pounding desperately. Another hissed, "No, if we run, they will hunt us. We must kill them now." His voice shook, betraying his own terror. The leader growled, trying to hold on to authority. "Enough! We are stronger. They are only flesh, only bones. Look at them. They have no claws, no armor. But even as he spoke, doubt twisted his features. The way the humans moved, the calmness in their eyes, the way the ship itself bent to their presence, it was nothing like weak flesh. It was something older, something far more dangerous. Suddenly, the walls of the chamber vibrated. Strange symbols lit up across the steel, glowing like fire. The markings shifted and rearranged themselves, forming words no alien could understand, but every human seemed to read with ease. The first human looked at them, nodded once, and whispered something under his breath. At that moment, the doors across the chamber slammed shut, locking the aliens in completely. The nervous alien grabbed his commander's arm. "We should never have touched this place. The warnings were true. We were told not to wake them." His voice cracked with terror. The leader pushed him away, his pride still refusing to collapse. "Silence! I am commander here. These are nothing but sleeping animals. We will control them." He raised his backup blade, stepping toward the humans. But his hands shook, betraying his fear. The first human stepped forward calmly, his bare feet echoing on the steel floor. "Animals?" he said quietly. "Perhaps. But the galaxy forgot one thing. Even animals will fight when cornered." His voice dropped lower, colder. "And we are not cornered." The aliens backed away as more humans gathered behind him, their numbers growing by the second. It was not just the bodies that terrified the aliens. It was the way they moved, not with confusion or weakness, but with discipline. Their steps fell in unison, their shoulders squared, their eyes sharp. They looked like soldiers who had simply been waiting for the order to rise. Fear broke through the crew. One alien screamed and tried to force the door open with his claws. Another fell to his knees, begging his commander to retreat. The smaller alien who had been afraid from the start shook his head slowly, whispering again and again, "We should have listened. We should have listened." The leader tried to shout over the chaos, but his voice was drowned by the growing hum of the ship. The humans spread out, their shadows long against the walls. The air felt heavier, pressing against the aliens' chests, making it harder to breathe. One alien finally snapped and threw his weapon down. "I will not stay here to die," he cried, rushing toward the back wall in search of another exit. But the moment he reached it, the steel shifted, smooth as liquid, sealing shut before his eyes. He struck it desperately, but the wall did not yield. The humans watched quietly, not lifting a hand, not making a sound. Their silence was more terrifying than any roar. It was the silence of confidence, the silence of those who knew the outcome already. The first human's eyes glinted as he spoke again. "You came here seeking power. You will find it, but not as you hoped." His voice echoed in the chamber, and the aliens felt their hearts freeze. Panic consumed them fully now. They realized the truth in those words. They were trapped, powerless, and surrounded by beings their ancestors had feared so much that they left warnings carved across the stars. The crew understood, in that dark moment, that they had not discovered history. They had awakened it, and there was no turning back. Dozens of pods hissed open in the chamber, each one spilling white steam that curled like smoke across the metal floor. Human figures stepped out one after another, their movements slow but steady. Their eyes scanned the room, calm and sharp, as if they already understood everything. The aliens, trapped between the sealed doors and the glowing pods, felt their courage drain away. The leader tried to hold on to authority. He lifted his blade, his voice hard but not steady. "They are nothing but sleepers, creatures from the past. Strike them down before they can act." His words were loud, but they rang hollow, bouncing off the walls without power. None of his crew moved forward. Their hands trembled, their breaths came short, and their gazes darted nervously toward the humans who stood taller and stronger with each passing moment. The humans began to gather together. They did not rush or shout. They moved with quiet discipline, their steps falling in unison, their bodies straight, as if some unspoken command guided them. The air in the chamber grew heavy, pressing down on the aliens' chests. It was not just the number of humans that frightened them, it was the way they carried themselves. They looked like soldiers rising from a long sleep, soldiers who remembered exactly what to do. The first human, the one who had woken before the others, stepped forward. His face was calm, but his voice cut through the silence like a blade. "You call us weak. You think flesh is fragile. Then tell me, why did your ancestors warn you never to wake us?" The words hit the aliens like a hammer. They remembered the glowing signs carved on the walls, the warnings etched into languages long forgotten. Fear tightened their throats, and some of them lowered their weapons without even realizing. One alien, desperate to prove strength, raised his weapon again. "You are lies! You are myths! We are stronger now. We rule the stars." He pulled the trigger, but his weapon fizzled out, sparks flying. The ship itself had silenced it, draining the power before the blast could form. The alien dropped the useless weapon, his hands shaking. His voice broke into a whisper. Why? Why does nothing work against them? The humans did not answer. Instead, they stood together, forming a line that looked more like an army than survivors. The human woman, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, spoke for the first time. Her voice was calm, but carried across the chamber with force. "The galaxy forgot us. That was your mistake." The aliens backed away, pressing against the walls. Their leader snarled, trying to hide his fear. "We are not afraid of shadows. There are more of us than you. You cannot win against the galaxy." The first human's lips curved into a faint, cold smile. He took another step forward, his shadow stretching across the floor. "Win?" he asked softly. "We do not need to win. We only need to wake." As if answering his words, more pods flared to life. Hundreds of lights glowed in the darkness, stretching far beyond the chamber into hidden halls. The sound of machinery echoed through the ship, pulsing like a heartbeat that had been waiting for centuries to return. The aliens felt despair crush them. It was no longer just a few humans. It was thousands. The ship was a tomb, yes, but also an army waiting beneath its skin. The nervous alien clutched his head, shaking as he whispered again and again, "We should have listened. We should have never touched this place." The leader raised his blade in a final act of defiance. His voice cracked, but he shouted anyway. "You cannot frighten us. You are only flesh and bone. You cannot fight us all." The first human's eyes burned with cold fire. He raised his hand, not in anger, but in command. Instantly, the other humans stood straighter, their movements synchronized like trained soldiers awaiting orders. The air itself seemed to vibrate with their unity. The human answered in a voice so calm it froze the alien's blood. "Flesh and bone built empires long before your kind crawled between the stars. Flesh and bone broke worlds in war. Flesh and bone was enough to make the galaxy fear us." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze piercing into the alien leader. And now, flesh and bone has awakened. The aliens had no reply. Their weapons were useless, their exit sealed, and their courage broken. The humans did not shout, did not rage, did not attack blindly. Their silence and calm discipline was more terrifying than violence. It was the silence of warriors who already knew the outcome. The leader stumbled backward, his blade lowering despite himself. His crew looked at him with desperate eyes, searching for an order, but none came. Their commander's strength had cracked, and with it, their last hope dissolved. The humans stepped closer, their footsteps echoing like drums of war. The chamber felt smaller, the walls closing in as more pods hissed open. The aliens realized then what the warnings had truly meant. The humans had not been locked away as prisoners. They had chosen to sleep, chosen to wait, because the galaxy itself was not ready for their return. The first human finally stopped a few steps away from the leader. His voice was quiet, almost gentle, but every syllable carried a weight that crushed the aliens' spirits. "You should not have ignored the warnings. They were not carved for decoration. They were carved in fear. Now that fear will live again." The leader's blade clattered to the ground. His crew stood trembling, pressed against the cold walls, their faces pale with terror. The humans did not strike them down. They only watched, waiting, their discipline unshaken. That was worse. The aliens realized with horror that mercy was not kindness. Mercy meant the humans had a plan. Mercy meant they were not in danger of losing. Mercy meant they had already decided what came next. The chamber pulsed with light, the heartbeat of an ancient power filling every corner. The humans stood ready, silent, and unbroken. The aliens understood the truth in that moment. They were no longer explorers of an old wreck. They were witnesses to the rebirth of a nightmare. The air inside the chamber grew warmer as more humans stepped out of their pods. Their pale skin slowly gained color, their muscles tightening, their movements becoming smoother with every second. It was as if their bodies were adjusting to life again, adapting faster than any natural creature should. The aliens could not believe what they were seeing. They had thought these were fragile relics, nothing but myths frozen in glass. But now, standing before them, the humans looked anything but weak. The first human, the one who had spoken before, raised his hand and touched the glowing walls. Strange symbols rippled under his palm, shifting into words only he seemed to understand. His eyes moved calmly across the markings, and then he spoke, his voice carrying across the chamber. "We were not defeated. We chose this sleep. It was not death. It was preparation." The aliens gasped. One of them stammered, "Preparation? For what?" His voice shook, full of dread. The human turned his gaze toward him, eyes cold and sharp. "For the time when the galaxy would need us again. For the time when others forgot why they feared us." The aliens felt their throats tighten. They remembered the warnings carved on the walls, repeated endlessly. "Do not wake the humans." At first, they had thought those messages were desperate cries from humans themselves. But now, a darker truth pressed into their minds. What if those warnings were carved not by humans, but by other civilizations? Civilizations that had encountered them, survived only long enough to beg the rest of the galaxy not to repeat the mistake? One of the braver aliens tried to push back his fear. He hissed, "Lies. You expect us to believe you? If you are truly so powerful, why would you hide here, buried in this tomb? Why would you sleep while the galaxy moved forward?" The first human's smile was cold and thin. Because the galaxy was not ready to face us. We were not needed yet. And when we were no longer wanted, when others feared what we could do, we chose to remove ourselves. But fear lingers. Even in your people, that fear carved the warnings you ignored. The alien crew muttered in panic. Their claws scratched against their weapons, but every time they lifted them, the systems in the ship seemed to drain their power. Their technology, their pride, their safety. It was useless here. The ship had already chosen its side. The human woman who had awoken earlier stepped forward. Her voice was steady, with a tone that carried authority. "You came here searching for treasure, for secrets. But this ship is not your prize. It is our cradle, our fortress, our memory. You were never meant to walk its halls." The leader growled, his pride clashing with his fear. "You speak as if you are gods. You are not gods. You are flesh. You bleed like us. You can be killed." The first human's eyes narrowed, and for a moment his calm expression hardened into steel. "Killed? Yes, we can die. But before we fall, we take empires with us. That is the truth your ancestors learned. That is why they left the warnings." He stepped closer, his presence pressing like a storm. "We are not gods. We are worse." The words struck the aliens deeper than any weapon could. Their bodies trembled, their courage broken. They were explorers, not soldiers. They had not come prepared for war, and yet war had found them in the form of ancient humans rising from the dark. The nervous alien, who had warned them from the beginning, fell to his knees, clutching his head. "We should have never touched this place," he whispered over and over. "They will destroy us all. They will destroy everything." The leader looked around, his crew collapsing into panic. He saw the fear in their eyes, and for the first time, he realized he could not command them anymore. His authority meant nothing here. His words had no power against the weight of history awakening in front of them. The first human turned away from the aliens and looked at his people. They gathered in silence, standing shoulder to shoulder, their movements sharp and precise. They spoke to each other in low tones, their language strange but efficient, filled with a sense of strategy. It was clear they were not waking confused or lost. They were waking as soldiers, as warriors who remembered exactly who they were. The humans began pressing their hands against the walls, against panels the aliens had not understood. The ship responded instantly. Lights blazed across the ceiling, power surged through the floor, and distant doors opened and closed, as if preparing for something greater. The aliens realized then that the humans were not only alive, they were taking control of the ship. "Stop them!" the leader shouted desperately, but no one moved. His crew cowered against the walls, their weapons powerless, their will shattered. The first human looked over his shoulder at the aliens, his eyes narrowing. "You thought us dead. You thought us myths. But you will be the ones to carry the message. You will tell your people. You will tell every empire." His voice dropped, colder, sharper. Humanity has awakened. The aliens' blood turned cold. They understood what he meant. He was not threatening only them. He was warning the entire galaxy. One alien whispered in a broken voice, "Why spare us? Why let us live?" The humans' answer was simple, but it carried a weight that crushed them. Because fear spreads faster than war. You will tell them. You will make them remember. And when they remember, it will already be too late. The aliens stared at him, their hearts pounding. The ship roared with life around them, systems long dormant, now fully awake. The humans stood together, their eyes burning with purpose, their voices calm and unified. The crew realized with terror that they had not discovered relics. They had uncovered humanity's greatest secret. The humans had not vanished. They had not been destroyed. They had chosen to sleep, waiting for the galaxy to forget just enough. And then, when the time came, to rise again stronger than before. The aliens pressed against the walls, their claws trembling. They wished they could vanish, wished they could undo the button their leader had pressed. But the truth was set. The humans were awake. The warning was no longer a threat written on old walls. It was reality standing in front of them. And there was no way back. The chamber lights dimmed and then flared brighter, as if the ship itself was taking a deep breath. The humans stood in silence, their bodies no longer frail from centuries of sleep. Their muscles tightened, their eyes glowed with quiet fire, and their movements were steady, almost unnaturally precise. The aliens, pressed against the walls, felt smaller than they ever had in their lives. One alien, trembling, tried to activate his communicator, hoping to call for help. The device sparked and died in his hand. The nervous alien gasped and whispered, "It is too late. The ship listens only to them now." His words cut through the group, confirming what everyone already feared. The first human stepped forward, his bare feet echoing on the steel floor. His voice was calm, but every syllable carried power. "You wanted to see what your ancestors feared. Now you will see. There is no escape." The alien leader tried to fight his fear. He held his blade tightly and hissed, "We are not helpless. We will not bow to you. You are only a few. There are billions of us across the stars. Even if you kill us here, you cannot fight them all." The human's cold smile returned. He tilted his head slightly, and behind him, dozens more humans stepped out of their pods, their footsteps in perfect unison. The sound echoed like drums of war. He answered softly, "We do not need to fight them all. They will destroy themselves when they realize we are awake. Fear is enough." The aliens shivered. The humans were not roaring or charging. They were calm, disciplined, certain. That calmness was worse than rage. It was the confidence of predators who already knew they had won. The leader, desperate to prove his strength, rushed forward with his blade. He swung with all his power, but before the strike could land, the human caught his wrist with one hand. The blade froze midair, shaking against the human's grip. The alien gasped, his strength failing, as the human's fingers tightened like iron. The leader's eyes widened in horror. No creature should have had such strength after centuries of sleep. The human leaned closer, his eyes unblinking. "You think you are the hunter," he whispered, "but you woke the wolves." With a swift motion, he twisted the blade from the alien's grasp and let it fall to the ground with a loud clang. The alien staggered back, his pride shattered. The rest of the crew panicked. Some tried to rush toward the sealed doors, pounding against them with claws and fists. Others fell to their knees, begging for mercy. Their voices overlapped in chaos, but the humans remained silent, watching with the same cold discipline. The human woman finally spoke, her voice steady. "Your weapons fail because this ship rejects you. Your escape fails because it knows you do not belong here. You were warned. You ignored the warnings. Now you will carry them again." The smaller alien shook his head, his body trembling. "We cannot carry anything. If we leave, we will be hunted by our own people. They will not believe us. They will call us liars or cowards or worse." The first human's gaze turned toward him. His voice dropped lower, colder. "They will believe, because fear is written in every word you will speak. When you return to them, your eyes will tell the truth your tongue cannot hide. That is enough." The aliens realized then that escape was not an option. The humans did not intend to kill them, not yet. They intended to let them live as messengers, as witnesses, as living proof of what had awakened. That was far worse than death. The leader, humiliated and broken, sank to his knees. His crew looked at him with despair, knowing he had failed them. The humans did not strike, did not advance. They only stood together, filling the chamber with the presence of something unstoppable. The ship shuddered, and distant echoes rolled through the corridors. Doors opened and closed by themselves. Energy surged through the walls, and the hum grew deeper, like a storm gathering strength. The aliens felt the truth press down on them. This was not a ship. It was a fortress, a weapon, a seat of war waiting for its masters to return. The humans looked at each other, exchanging words in a language the aliens could not understand. Their voices were calm, clipped, efficient. They sounded like commanders planning a campaign, not survivors adjusting to life. The first human raised his hand, and the others fell silent instantly. His eyes burned with determination as he turned back to the aliens. You came here thinking you would take what was ours, but you will leave with nothing but fear. Remember this moment. Remember it when you speak to your leaders. Remember it when your people laugh at your warnings. And when the skies burn again, remember that it was your hand that woke us. The aliens bowed their heads, some sobbing quietly, others too numb to speak. Their pride, their arrogance, their laughter when they first entered the ship, it all seemed like a dream now. Reality was heavier. Reality was a nightmare. The smaller alien whispered to himself, his voice breaking. We woke the nightmare. We woke the nightmare. His words spread through the group until the others repeated them, a broken chant of regret and horror. The humans remained still, their faces unreadable. They did not rejoice, they did not gloat, they did not smile. Their silence was worse than any threat. It was the silence of certainty, the silence of beings who had already chosen the future. The chamber doors finally slid open with a low groan. The path back to the alien ship lay exposed, but none of the crew moved. Their legs felt too heavy, their hearts too weak. The first human gestured toward the door, his voice calm but commanding. Go. Carry the message. Tell them what you have done. Tell them what is coming. The aliens hesitated, but one by one they stumbled toward the exit, broken and defeated. Not one of them looked back. Not one dared. Behind them, the humans stood tall, their shadows stretching long across the walls. The ship pulsed with power, its heartbeat steady and strong. The nightmare was awake, and the galaxy would soon learn the truth. And for the aliens, it was already too late. The alien crew stumbled through the opening doors, their steps heavy and unsteady. Their claws scraped against the floor as they rushed toward their own ship, their faces pale with fear. None of them spoke. None of them dared to look back. Every second they stayed inside the human vessel felt like standing on the edge of a burning pit. The words of the first human echoed in their minds. Go. Carry the message. Tell them what is coming. When they crossed into their docking bay, they gasped with relief, but it was an empty kind of relief. Their ship's lights flickered, as if even their vessel knew it was too close to something it should never have touched. The nervous alien collapsed into his seat, covering his face with his shaking claws. We are cursed, he whispered. We woke what should have stayed buried. The leader, once arrogant and proud, now sat slumped in his chair. His eyes were hollow, his blade gone, his voice weak. No, he muttered, though the word carried no strength. We did not wake a myth. We woke reality. His claws dug into the armrest, but he could not stop his body from trembling. The smaller alien raised his head, his eyes wet with fear. What do we tell them? When we return, what do we say? They will not believe us. They will laugh. The leader looked at him, and for the first time, there was no pride left in his eyes, only despair. They will believe, he said, because fear cannot be hidden. They will see it in our faces, in our voices. Even if they deny our words, the truth will already spread. Behind them, through the viewing screen, the massive human ship glowed with power. Lights burned across its hull, systems awakening that had slept for centuries. It was no longer a silent relic drifting in space. It was alive, dangerous, and ready to move. The aliens stared at it with dread. They had come here searching for treasure, for secrets, for pride. Instead, they had unleashed something that should have never been touched. Inside the human ship, the first human stood among his people. More pods continued to open, more warriors stepping out into the cold air. They moved with unity, calm and steady, as if centuries of sleep had not stolen a single memory of discipline. Their eyes locked on their leader, waiting for his words. He raised his hand, and silence fell instantly. His voice was not loud, but it carried through the halls with unshakable strength. We slept because the galaxy feared us. We slept because we were not needed. But now we are awake, and the galaxy has forgotten. It is time they remember. The humans bowed their heads slightly, acknowledging his command. There was no cheering, no celebration, no wild roar of victory. Only silence and determination. They were not children waking from a dream. They were soldiers returning to their duty. The ship responded to their presence. Engines that had been silent for centuries hummed with deep power. Shields flickered alive, covering the vessel in invisible armor. Weapons systems pulsed with light, charging with energy the aliens could not even recognize. The heartbeat of war echoed through every hall. On the alien ship, the crew watched in horror as the massive vessel began to shift. It turned slowly, deliberately, its glowing lights scanning the stars as if searching for a target. One alien pressed his claws to the viewing screen, whispering in disbelief. It should not be able to move. Not after all this time. How can it move? The nervous alien shook his head, his voice trembling. Because it was never broken, it was never abandoned, it was waiting. The leader finally lifted his head, his voice hoarse. We will return to our people. We will tell them what we saw. But it will not matter. The humans are awake. The galaxy cannot stop them. His words sent a chill through every alien on board. Inside the human ship, the first human walked to the front of the chamber, his eyes fixed on the distant stars. His face was calm, but his words carried the weight of a storm. They will run, he said. They will spread fear. That is good. Let fear spread. When fear takes root, they will remember who we are. They will remember why they warned each other never to wake us. And when they remember, it will already be too late. His people stood behind him, silent and ready. Their eyes burned with the same cold fire. None of them doubted. None of them hesitated. They had waited for this moment, and now it had come. The alien ship disengaged from the docking bridge, pulling away as fast as it could. The crew sat in silence, watching the human vessel grow smaller on their screens. But even as it shrank in size, it seemed larger than any star, larger than any empire. It was not just a ship, it was a symbol of what had returned. One alien buried his face in his claws. What will they do now? He asked, his voice hollow. The smaller alien answered without looking away from the screen. They will remind the galaxy why the warnings were carved. They will remind us all what it means to wake the humans. As their ship fled into the darkness, the human vessel remained behind, glowing with unstoppable power. Inside, the humans stood united, their silence heavy with purpose. They did not need to shout their victory. The galaxy would hear it soon enough. The first human's final words echoed through the halls, carried by the pulse of the ship itself. You should have let us sleep. And in that moment, the fate of the galaxy shifted forever.